Hello, everyone. I'm Frank Garza with Lean Startup Company, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the webcast. Today's topic is how startup Bounce iterated their big, crazy idea into a six-figure business in under a year. And moderating the discussion is our own Lean Startup Company faculty member, Elliot Susel. Our guest is CEO and co-founder of Bounce, Cody Candee. And with that, I'll hand things off to Elliot.
Hello, my name is Elliot Susel. I'm a senior faculty member at Lean Startup Company. And with me today on the show is CEO and co-founder of the company Bounce. That's Cody Candee.
Thank you. Good to be here, Elliot.
Hey, welcome. So in today's show, we're going to be chatting with Cody about his company. And he's going to very briefly introduce us to sort of what the company does. And then we're going to move into a dialogue around how he decided to start this company, what that journey was like. And along the way, we'll sort of explore the different things that we can take away and apply to the problems that we're solving today, be it in large companies or whether or not you're exploring starting your own business. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. So
Awesome.
the two sentences of what Bounce is short-term storage all over urban areas for people to leave their things when they're on the go, hosted by local businesses that have extra space. So as a traveler or someone going around a city, you can leave your things anywhere, whether this is your luggage, your backpack, your gym bag. And as a small business or bigger business, just someone with retail space, you can monetize your extra storage space by opening it up on the Bounce platform.
Nice. How did you come across this idea? Like, was this a problem you experienced yourself and you're like, man, like I wish there was an easier way?
Yeah, so I've been obsessed with this idea of things and things holding you down and minimalism in general, and have really realized how much time people spend commuting out of the way to get rid of their things or even planning their lives around their things. And so I felt like it's incredibly surprising that this problem hasn't been solved, yet so many people can relate to it. So it's been marinating in my brain for a few years, and I finally started working on it last year.
Nice. Okay, so how did you transition from marinating to working on it? What shifted for you where it's like, you know what, I want to take some steps. What shifted?
Yeah, so basically I had just wrapped up a previous startup that I was working on and was exploring what to do next with my time. And I had the idea for Bounce 3 years prior to this, and I decided not to start it because it was too complex. But I was obsessed with it for a period of time before I decided to not pursue it. I was working into it at the time, and basically just sort of put it on the back burner. And then when I was thinking about what to do next, my friend said, hey, what about Bounce, this idea you were so passionate about a couple of years ago? You're looking for what to work on now. Why don't you do this? And I was like, oh, no, that's too hard. And then I was talking to my now co-founder, Alex, and we were both obsessed with the vision and obsessed with the problem. And we felt like there's definitely something there. We just have to spend more time exploring what that initial solution might look like.
Got it. And so you said co-founder. So you had this idea, you were sort of bouncing that, I'm not intended. You were discussing it with this other person, and then you both decided we're going to do this together. Because I know taking on a co-founder is something that folks put a lot of thought into and is sometimes pretty complex. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. It's working with a co-founder is I should say finding and agreeing to work with a co-founder is like a marriage. And I've spent a lot of time, previous startups and whatnot, really seeing how important it is to have a good co-founder. And a good co-founder isn't an objective thing; it's a very subjective thing. You have to really think the same way about how you go about building companies and even company culture. And so when I met Alex a couple years prior to this, we immediately had founder crushes on each other. We were both working in startups at the time and just completely hit it off of how we think about getting things off the ground. And so when I was looking at starting Bounce, I reached out to Alex and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about. And we just immediately thought, hey, let's spend some time on this and see if it makes sense to get married, so to speak.
Okay, so you decide you're going to spend some time on it. What did that look like? Like, what's the first thing that you go do?
Yeah. So at the time, this was about a year ago, our vision was cloud, and still is, cloud computing infrastructure for the physical world. So distributed storage all around the city, all around multiple cities, and the ability to pull things from storage so your things move around seamlessly. That's the nerdy vision. From the consumer side, it's that your things never hold you down. It's that you always have access to what you need and the ability to get rid of your things so they don't. So you're not planning your days around it. And so that was our vision. And the initial idea, the one that I decided not to work on a few years ago, was just like calling an Uber. You know, you use Balance, someone comes in a car and picks up your stuff. And then when you want it back, you press a button and they come back and bring it back to you. And that would be really hard to start. I think the future will look like that. And hopefully Balance will be the one to be doing that. But getting it off the ground right now would require tons of capital and you'd need a lot of scale before you can make that work. And so that's the reason I didn't start it initially 4 years ago. Basically, but I felt like something was really there. And so iterating on this vision, we said, all right, let's try it out. I think the best way to figure out what to build is to start building something that you're passionate about and something where you think something's there, and that will lead you towards the business, right? You're not going to learn what to build in a conference room or at a whiteboard. You kind of have to get started with something to be talking to customers and seeing how it all comes together.
So what I'm hearing is you started by saying, we have this big vision.
Yeah.
And actually, we think the big vision cannot be accomplished with the resources we have available to us today. And in fact, that might be jumping the gun. Like, how do we know that this is really even a business? Okay, so you were looking for something less than the whole thing that could teach you whether or not that whole thing might be viable.
That's right. And we were also thinking, maybe there's a chance we could do it. Let's just try it, right? Like, what is the minimum prototype that we could roll out and start learning? And so,
I like the bias for action.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what were some of those first actions that you took to learn?
Yeah. So the first thing was, this is a big, crazy vision. Do people want it? Is this too crazy that no one would use a product along this line of thinking? And so we thought about what is the biggest thing that needs to be true for this to be a successful business, or if it were false, that this just would never work. And that is that people are willing to hand over their valuables to strangers.
That's funny. So you had a leap of faith assumption and you identified it.
That's
so
right.
We need to bring clarity to this leap of faith assumption. I like that. It's funny. Some of the best ideas sound really stupid, right? Like give your stuff to a stranger is something that you've been taught to not do for your entire life. Okay. So then what?
Yeah. So then we said, all right, how can we test this assumption and see, one, learn from customers, and two, see if there's something there, and three, waste as little time as possible if this just won't work out. If people will just never do that, then we shouldn't spend any more time on this business.
Yeah. And so do you have a limited runway, right? So at this point, are you still working in your day job, or you've stopped and you have some amount of time where you have to make it work, or you're going to have to do something else with your life?
Yeah, we were both all in on, let's spend all of our time validating something or disvalidating something. That's very much how my co-founder and I think. And I would say we vet this idea, we vet what to work on, probably more critically than most VCs would vet us, just because we're going to be spending the next decade on this, and this is our one shot. We'll be working on one company at a time, whereas VCs can have portfolios of dozens of companies. So we're really critical about what needs to be true for us to be willing to work on this.
Right on.
Yeah. So the way we ran that first experiment was, so again, the assumption is people are willing to hand their things over to strangers. So we put up a web page, no code, just used one of the services like Squarespace. I don't remember which one, and basically spent 4 hours, maybe less, putting something together, saying, hey, call this number, someone will come pick up your things and bring them back to you. We put that in front of a few people. We put Google AdWords up, and after putting Google AdWords up, 5 minutes later, the phone rings and someone says, hey, is this Bounce? Can you come pick up my stuff? And my co-founder and I, we were just sitting around, hacking around in a room for the last few hours, and we're like, oh, wow, here's a real customer. And so I'm talking to her on the phone and she's asking me all these questions. How much does it cost? How does it work? And I'm making it all up on the fly as if we were a real business. I don't that I knew we'd be able to deliver on, but I made it all up on the fly. And so she said, come pick up my stuff tomorrow at this time. I gave her a price. And my co-founder and I hung up the phone and then we were like, whoa, like we have to go take this person's luggage now.
We just committed. So it's interesting. So you actually went forward with sort of offering the service in full to this person, which would help you learn. Well, it's interesting because I imagine that for many large businesses, they don't have the sort of freedom to actually offer the product. But a technique I've often seen in that situation is after they've made the call, you sort of let them know the product or service isn't actually available, but would they like a discount when it is, or to be notified or something like that. But you actually, so you've offered the service and how was it working with this first customer?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's critical to offer what the service is, and you certainly can't offer it at scale. So the way we delivered it was we literally hopped on the blue city bikes in New York City and rode over to where she was. The night before, we were thinking, how do we make this look legit? We didn't have enough time to get Bounce branded clothes or, there wasn't a whole lot we could do with our time to look professional. And so we had to get really creative, and we were standing in the grocery store and we were like, what do we do? And we literally bought saran wrap and decided we would take one of our own suitcases, saran wrap it, put a little sticker label on it. And then when we showed up, we'd say, oh yeah, we're doing a run around the city, picking up multiple customer items. Here's one that we just picked up. And now we're grabbing yours. And so the lady was super nice and handed over her stuff. There were valuables in there. There was an iPad that she told us about. And basically she said, oh, where's the van? And my co-founder said, oh, we're doing rounds right now. Then we'll go get in the van. Then we'll get picked up and bring this to the facility. And so the van, sure enough, was an Uber pool. And we took that back to our apartment and stored it at our very first storage location, our apartment.
Yeah. Okay. So how long, out of curiosity, do people typically put things into storage with you? It's for short amounts of time, right?
That's right. So the average is 5 hours of storage.
Okay.
Today.
So it's a small amount of space for a small amount of time for a small amount of money.
That's right. So a lot of travelers use us for luggage storage. We have locals who use us before going to events like at Madison Square Garden, or even before going to the gym, after going to the gym, after work, that sort of thing. And we have a ton of crazy use cases as well. Our top user is a massage therapist who uses us 3 to 4 times per week on their massage table. We had a call last week from a magician who wanted to use us regularly.
They can just make their stuff disappear?
Yeah.
So, okay. So you're running this first experiment. You had one customer. Presumably you have more than one customer?
That's right. Yeah, we ran it. We took 5 to 10 customers before we said, all right, we feel pretty confident that there's at least a subset of people out there who are willing to hand over their things to strangers. We can proceed with that assumption being valid on this business.
Okay. Yeah. So it's no longer the riskiest assumption. So then what was your next sort of most risky assumption?
Yeah, so then we were thinking, okay, we got that down. What do we do next? And we were pretty exhausted from riding around the city on bikes and just thinking, this wasn't worth earning $18 for. And so
you did charge money.
Yeah, we've only taken paying customers. We've never given something away for free unless we were rectifying an issue.
Okay.
And so, yeah, basically we felt like the business model was the next thing. It wasn't, even if we hired out someone else to do pickups and deliveries, we felt like it was expensive. It would be difficult. We wouldn't be able to fulfill 5-star experiences consistently, at least not immediately. And so we thought about how can we make this leaner? And the next idea for Bounce on the business model was using small businesses where you could drop your things off in one location and then have it picked up somewhere else. So rather than door-to-door delivery, it's around the corner from you to around the corner from you. And so we changed the landing page. We said what the concept was and did the same thing. Put Google AdWords up and put it in front of people at the co-working space we were in. And we watched and see what happens. And someone calls, the first person in this model, they called and said, hey, yeah, can you do you have a location in this area? And I said, oh, we're actually opening a bunch of locations later this month. Let me see if any of them will open earlier in a location near you. I think we might have one there. Let me call you back in 15 minutes. And so I hang up the phone, and then I go and I call a bunch of small businesses in this time. And I say, hey, can you store a suitcase for 5 hours, and we'll pay you $5 for it? And made a few phone calls and got one that said yes. And so I called the customer back and I said, yeah, we do have a location for you. In fact, you're going to be the first customer at this location. And so I'll actually be at that location. I'm the founder of Bounce. And so I'll get to meet you, and I'll make sure it goes seamlessly. And she said, okay, great. So then I ride my bike over to that location. I help the small business do the process, to take the bag in, and I get a chance to ask the customer questions. How did you find out about Bounce? What made you want to use it? What made you almost not want to use it? And I got so much valuable information from doing that. So again, I did that 5 to 10 times to sort of validate that this model could work. And I actually learned something unexpected in this process. I learned that there were enough people willing to pick up and drop off their bags from the same location. And I thought, wow, this will be even easier to get off the ground. And
yeah, because you were describing, I think, that you could pick up or drop off at one location and pick up somewhere else.
That's right.
That's right. But it sounds like they just want to pick up from the same location, which
there were enough customers that wanted to do that we could proceed just with that very, very simple model.
Nice. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to sort of key into there is talking to customers. Now, at this point, it's still just 2 of you, right?
That's right.
Okay. And so I have often advised that it is critical for even the CEO to be chatting with customers as frequently as possible. You're a year in, pretty far along from these initial experiments. Are you still chatting with customers?
Every single day.
To tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So
how do you even get in front of customers to do that?
Yeah, we're a little bit less than a year in. We officially started last August. We did all these experiments in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Basically went from, is this a crazy idea that could work, to, all right, we're ready to spend the rest of our, the next decade, maybe the rest of our lives on this. And so we were just so excited about the vision and the potential here and the customers that we had talked to already. And so then we started building the actual product. We started writing the first lines of code. And we've grown really fast in that time period, got a product out really, really quickly, and have substantially grown the business, thousands of users, and multiple cities now. We just launched San Francisco. And in terms of customers, so we have very open support channels right now. So folks can message us. We use intercom. Folks can call us. Folks can email us. And we talk to customers every day, everyone on the team. So I do this, you can answer customers. So this is just customer support, but it gives me an opportunity to ask customers, hey, how did you find out about us? Or what are the things they're calling about that are things we could solve in the product? And then my co-founder, Alex, he's been deep in development mode, but he would take calls as well. And it's really helped him a lot in development. We were having a conversation today about building the mobile app, and he said, customers constantly are asking where a location is, even though we present all the locations on there. And so the conclusion from that is, if we just tell a customer which location they should book, it seems like that is what they want. They want to be told what to do a little bit more, rather than be presented with a ton of options. And so there's a ton of things like that we just learn all the time from talking to customers.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mention customer support as a really good way to be chatting with customers, because that's something that I've often recommended. I noticed on your website, you've got a little chat widget that you can open up and start chatting with somebody. And that is something that I've heard and I've often advised is a really great technique for getting even your engineers in front of customers. So at some point along the way, you have those initial experiments. Do you still run experiments now that you're a year in?
Yeah, absolutely. I think every feature should be started with experiments. Every idea, I think everything should start that way. I think that the opposite approach is sitting in a meeting room and guessing what you think the customer wants. Whereas the real way to do it, and how you'll save a ton of time, is going in front of customers and saying, hey, this is what it looks like, either showing them a real product or just asking them. Of course, it's the most valuable if you can prototype the idea or the feature in front of them, and then see how they interact with it. Because it's so hard to predict customer behavior. Even if you're the best product manager in the world, the best consumer insights manager in the world, it is so impossible to predict what customers want.
Sure. And it sounds like the sort of style of MVP you use for that is a prototype. In this case, are you using like a clickable prototype or mock-ups or something along those lines?
So it really depends on what it is. I think prototypes can really be anything. I worked at a venture studio, Factory X, for a little bit with Tom Chi, I think he was on the founding team of Google X. And our big thing, he's done a few TED Talks on rapid prototyping. And the whole idea is, how can you put some version of something that mimics the key behavior that you want to test? How can you put that out there as fast as possible so you can see how consumers respond to that? And so it's really about getting really clear about what that key behavior change is, and then prototyping around that. And so some prototypes may be as simple as using a chat widget that looks like an automated responder, and you're just typing there on Slack or WhatsApp or Intercom. Some may be a web page that looks like a real product. Some may be, you might just talk to the customer and tell them, hey, this is how something works, and see how they respond to it. And then ask them for feedback and say, okay, well, let me show you a different way, and then show them something slightly different, and then just keep iterating that way.
Sure. Yeah. All of these different approaches of learning what it is you need to learn without building the whole thing can be sort of tremendously valuable. And the way that I've often described that is that you get more at-bats, more opportunities to using a baseball metaphor here, either hit a home run or get a runner home. So along those lines of having people talk to customers, at some point you decided, or did you decide it's time to do hiring? Is it still just the two of you?
So we just made our first full-time hire, and we have a couple folks who work with us part-time, and then we have a couple interns this summer. So we're actually a team of 7 in New York this summer.
Okay. Congratulations on your first hire. I have often heard that you can make better hires by first having done the job for quite some time yourself, so that you know much more clearly what it is that you need. Has that been sort of your experience so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first hire we made is she's our head of partnerships and operations. And so what that means is signing on new stores for us, thinking about how to systematically scale that up. So rather than signing on one at a time, how do we get inbound? How do we get folks coming in 10 at a time? And then on the operations side, how do we streamline things so we, when we're storing, the way that we're handling thousands of customers in a day rather than hundreds or dozens or whatever it is, everything, every time we double, things tend to break. So she can help streamline those sorts of things. And so those were things that my co-founder and I did prior to her coming on board. I signed on a ton of stores on my own, figured out how to do it, talked to some bigger potential partners as well, retail chains, to really get a sense of what that was like. So I would be able to know, 1, how to do that, 2, how to bring someone else on board. In fact, someone gave us an intro to someone who could do lead generation abroad for us for really cheap. And I said that we should have our first hire, Devika, get really up to speed first before we bring 2 people into the fold, because I think it's important for her to do that role before she outsources part of her role as well. So totally think it's important to do the role yourself before you hire it out.
Sure. And in addition, so another sort of big transition point is frequently the point at which you need to go out for funding. Is that a bridge you've had to cross yet?
Yeah, we're in the middle of that right now. I think the best way to do fundraising in an ideal world, if everything goes your way, is to just build a great business and investors come to you. Maybe you have a couple of relationships along the way. And that happens for some entrepreneurs, but oftentimes it's a lot harder. And I think that looking at fundraising with a lean startup kind of approach is actually really useful. So one of the things we did going into our fundraising round was we said, we want to prove the scalability of Bounce to ourselves, but also to investors. You know, we want to be able to preempt every concern we can think of and that we think they might have. And so, you know, one is Bounce is Bounce something that would only work in New York? Someone asked me that once and I was like, no way, but I need data to back that up, right? So we went to San Francisco. We launched San Francisco in 7 days. And so now I have the data to say, yeah, Bounce is super scalable. We could be in 10 cities in a year if we'd like to. And, you know, when having investor conversations, we have, you know, we're creating all the data to show the business here. I think, you know, proving it to ourselves is key, because investors, they'll have to trust the founders to be able to run the business and understand the risks themselves rather than them just digging into it. So us being able to be on top of that has proven to be really valuable.
Sure. Now, on the topic of sort of getting to scale, I heard you mention, you know, you're exploring a mobile app and you've got some amount of technology now. Did your first versions have sort of custom coded technology or what was your approach there?
So none of the prototypes in June had any code that we wrote ourselves. It was all, you know, let's put something out there just to get users to call us and try to make this work. That meant handling customers one by one, really high touch, right? So we can't build a business that serves even 10 customers a day doing it like that. But you want to get to that point where things break before you say, all right, let's invest in writing code. And so our first product, we did want to write as fast as possible. I think it's a good thought to assume that your first product, you should just treat it like throwaway code, because you're going to learn so much from users in the next year that you'll probably be rewriting everything from scratch. And we're actually rewriting our whole backend right now to move faster. So yeah, we basically put our first version together in a month, and that was a full booking flow where folks can book, and we were completely hands-off. Someone would book a location on Bounce, they would send them the email of where to go, all the information, and then they'd be able to show up to that store, and we wouldn't have to be involved at all.
And at that point, this was a custom coded sort of MVP that you had built, right?
That's correct.
I'm using this word MVP. This is, of course, one of the least understood but most used terms in technology. So maybe I should say you built something minimal that let you get started, right? And that did involve custom code after you run those first couple experiments. And I guess a part of the reason you could do that is that you had a technical co-founder. And the way you sort of hedged against investing too much in technology is you figured this is probably stuff that's all going to get thrown away. Let's just get something done quickly rather than perfectly.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right on. So as you're sort of growing, and at this stage in your growth, you know, you've said, can this scale? Can we go to other cities? What now is the most risky assumption? And I'll say this sort of as an aside to the viewers of the show today, that this is a question I think we should constantly be asking ourselves, right? Like, what is most risky? What do I work on next? So to that end, what's most risky for your business at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the biggest one of the biggest challenges in the company to date, and I think in the future and for many companies, is the balance between short-term growth versus long-term product investment. And we can spend time getting quick revenue wins and growing in that way, but we want to spend more time building towards our big vision, building for some users who have some of these local use cases, like subscriptions. We validated that with a couple paying customers in a very lean startup kind of way. And we could start building that right now and start getting those customers now, or we could focus on immediate growth. And in any company, I mean, it's definitely true of public companies, there's so much focus on short-term growth. And for us too, you know, if we're in the middle of a fundraising round, we want our numbers to constantly be going up. And so it's really a balance between grabbing more revenue versus building the product up towards new, bigger things and towards the vision that we want to be moving to.
Yeah. Got it. So, one thing that is sort of churning in the back of my mind has to do with sort of the competitive landscape, right? So you're starting this business. This was a problem you saw people had, and I think you've mentioned that there weren't necessarily sort of great solutions available to them. What sort of existing alternatives are available to your customer for this product, and how do you sort of defend your business from someone else coming in and either copying what you're doing or sort of stealing the idea?
Yeah, so in terms of what people were doing before Bounce, there's a couple of interesting pieces here. One is we've heard from so many users that they would go to a hotel, maybe not even a hotel they're using, and tip the doorman or tell them that they're staying at that hotel to leave their things there. And this is true of travelers, but even locals wanted to leave their backpack. So that was one thing, and I guess that's called a shadow market. That's how one VC described it to me. Another one, and this one kills me, is people commuting so far out of the way just to get rid of their things. So the status quo today is you arrive to a city and you go straight to your hotel just to drop your stuff off, even if your meetings are in a different part of town. Or after work, you go all the way home, even if you're going somewhere else after work, just to drop your stuff off or get things. And so there's a lot of inefficiency there. And people commuting out of the way is one of the biggest alternatives to Bounce, and that one really can. In terms of other competitors, there's local ones like we serve a lot of travelers today, just given the nature of the current product. And so there's a lot of folks doing that, both local businesses as well as some companies in Europe that have started doing something similar. Actually, they have been doing it longer than us. But when we got started and we noticed these guys, we felt like no one was really heading towards this big vision that we had. And also none of the other teams had been around for long enough that we felt like we could build what they had. We felt we'd be number one in a very short amount of time. And I'm talking about things like no technical founders on the team. And then also there was one company in New York that had 16 locations when we were starting, and we signed up 5 in a week, and I was like, we could get 20 in a month. So like if we just go all out and do this, we'll be number one. And so since then the space has heated up, but I really think that this is parallel to when Airbnb got started. There were a lot of websites for, book out your extra room, your extra couch. But it really took a team with this sort of mentality of let's build a giant company. Let's, we have the technical abilities on the founding team to do it and to iterate really fast. And then most importantly, I think a really, really big vision. We want to build this into a giant company with the whole vision of, cloud computing infrastructure for the physical world. And so, what we are today is just a small fraction of what we're going to be.
Right on. And I'll sort of add that, the company that gets there first is not usually the one that wins the space.
Exactly.
So, I'll point to Google as a really good example of that. A company I worked at that fell victim to this, I suppose you could say, is Taxi Magic. Very few people have heard of it. Lets you book a real licensed taxi driver and a medallioned 100% unquestionably legal taxi. But everybody's heard of Uber, who joined a little bit later and completely ate our lunch.
Wow.
So, yes, I think competitive advantage is something I would be thinking about at some point, but maybe it's a little early to go all in on that. I will say at some point, your network becomes a pretty powerful advantage, right? Of all the different storage locations that you have relationships with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been huge. And even building that into being the best experience for those small business owners. They have all been extremely loyal to us. And I think that, part of what we're building is, owning, not owning in that sense, but having the real estate all around urban areas, in the most valuable areas, right by the key train stations, and being a partner with them where we now have all the space that we can tap into in prime spots.
So we've talked a lot about the problem of who's sort of paying you money. Talk to me a little bit about the problem that you're solving for the business owner. They're making money, but
Mhm.
what is in it for them, and how did you learn that this was a thing that they were going to be interested in? I mean, it sounds like you just sort of went out and talked to some, and you could convince a few with your charm to sign up, but not just a few. It scales, right?
Yeah, we have over 60 now. We'll have over 100 in a month. Yeah, so basically what we did here is there's two key value propositions for the small business owners. One is the extra foot traffic that we send to their stores. The other is a revenue share. We give them money for every bag stored. And I think it's really the perfect time to be starting Bounce, because 5 years ago, this idea probably would have been crazy to them. Hey, can you store some random person's thing in your shop? And now there's been so many companies that have changed some of these social norms, like Airbnb. You can stay in a random person's house, or get in a random car with, a random stranger's car, Uber, right? And so I think it's the space has really opened up to this sort of paradigm shift. And then additionally, brick and mortar has been getting squeezed, right? And so they need all the foot traffic they could get, the extra revenue streams. And so coming in and saying, hey, we're not only going to send extra traffic to your stores, but you get paid for it too. For folks who get it, it's a pretty easy sell.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are you finding that it's like one type of business that's mostly interested in this, like restaurants? Or
Yeah, it's actually much more diverse than you would think. I thought we might gravitate towards, one specific one, but there are some that do it just for the revenue. There are some that do it just for the foot traffic. We've had some stores that have said every single Bounce customer has purchased from their store. That's a gift and stationery store. Then you can think about the shipping store, like a UPS kind of place. And these places are already used to having extra revenue streams, extra things like passport photos or fingerprinting services. And so Bounce is sort of an easy plug-in to their business, where now, they use their extra space and get extra money, and they don't necessarily care as much about the foot traffic, but they love that extra revenue stream.
Yeah. And along the way, right, and certainly as you continue to grow, I imagine you'll encounter some weird situations. Someone leaves their bag and never picks it up, or like, what if they have something? Let's say it's just smelly, but like, a bag that is otherwise offensive or is unsafe. I mean, how have you thought about that sort of stuff?
Yeah, we think about that stuff all the time. One of the things we rolled out is an insurance policy. We're going to be rolling out a really, really good policy in the next quarter that I'm really excited about. But one of the ways we scale that is not only the insurance piece, but also empowering the store owners to have authority. So they can, if a bag is smelly or if they feel like something's fishy and there's, maybe something they don't want to store, they're able to ask the customer, hey, can I see inside your bag before we do this? And then they can reject customers if they'd like. So we absolutely think about that all the time, and how to do it now, but also how to do it at scale.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's maybe a little premature to invest too much in solving that problem, but it sounds like you have got a solve in place, so when the solution's encountered, the business owner knows what to do.
That's right.
So at this point, what sort of advice would you give to those who are either working within a large company and they have a project that they're working on that they want to explore, or maybe it's even a new idea they want to explore within the context of that company, or for someone who's starting their own business? Kind of what advice might you offer to them?
Yeah, so I used to work in a big company. I worked at Intuit right out of college. I worked there for 3 years, had a fantastic experience. And yeah, it's absolutely, in a big company where there's so many processes, also so many resources, and oftentimes you need a lot of buy-in. It still is the most effective way to test something with real users, to say, hey, rather than us sitting in a conference room and guessing what we think the user wants or what will resonate the most with a certain segment, actually just go out and put it in front of users. At a big company like Intuit, it was great because there was a whole user research team where you could send them an email and they'd bring 10 people into the campus to
That helps.
Doing it as a startup, you have to recruit them yourself, but it takes $50 Amazon gift cards times 10 people on Craigslist or whatever it may be. There's a lot of resources out there for how to do it. And it's pretty easy to get customers out there. In fact, I think it's much easier at a big company because you already have lots of customers, presumably, even for a new product. Let's say you're into it and you have a ton of accounting customers, but you're building a brand new product that they've never used. Well, you can tap into your existing customer base of accounts, put something in.
Yeah. A bias for action and talking to customers. It's good advice. Is there anything else that you would want to sort of share with our viewers about either starting a new company or scaling it or running experiments?
I would say just get out there and put something in front of users, because that's the best way to learn. You can sit and think about how to make it work, why it will work, why it won't work, but you'll learn the most by just getting out there and doing something, even if you think that something won't work.
Yeah. And along those lines, I want to explore that just a little more. A bias for action, but do you put some structure around what that activity is before you go and do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is being really clear about I think it's really good to have sort of pass-fail criteria. Easier said than done. And I think that if you don't perfect it, it's fine. But having the idea of what does success look like on this, what does failure look like on this is really useful.
Yeah, I would agree completely that before we can't really call it an experiment if we don't have sort of success criteria defined. How do we know that what we believe is either true or false? Conventionally, this is done by creating a hypothesis, right? Where you actually put quantification to that belief and then measure. I like it. So with all of that said, the advice from Cody, bias for action, but also structure to it. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap?
I think that's it. If you're in New York or San Francisco or one of the cities we'll be in soon, you should try Bounce. It's usebounce.com. Let us know what you think. We're always looking to learn from people. And always excited to chat with folks interested in this space as well. So happy to answer other questions from folks too.
Right on. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. Cody, thank you so much for your time. It was really great to have you on here. You can visit their website at usebounce.com. And if you have questions for either of us, you can send me an email, Elliot, ELLIOT, at leanstartup.co. Look forward to receiving your messages and chatting with you soon. Cody, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Elliot.